I'm Aria Schwartz along with Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show where it's all about the W. Rachel is back from her vacation, so it's time for some hot takes, and we got to dive right in. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. If you're looking for a fun way to enjoy the W, join us over on Playback for our watch parties. They're super fun, engaging, and sometimes some people break some news on it. The link is playback.tv/Winsidr. That's playback.tv/Winsidr. And you never know when we're going to do a giveaway. Welcome back to the Winsidr Show. I'm excited. Rachel's back. We've kicked Matt out. He's gone. He's done. But Rachel's back. It's time for the hot takes to commence. You look a little sunburnt. You got some sun. You had some soul searching. Have you figured out? No, I'll wait till the end of the episode.
Yeah, I know. Don't even do it.
So I always truly enjoy when you're on this yearly vacation because it gives me an opportunity to completely, shape and mold your view of the W season early on because you rely on me to give you game updates and then I get to like throw in my little bits and pieces. I kid, but I'm serious. Anytime I can, poison your brain to have the same beliefs as me, it works.
It's hard. Like we're driving a 10-hour trip, and so I'm like in the car, just like watching the live scores, trying to figure out what's going on. And then like in the little pockets that I did have service, I'd watch one or two of the games. But no, I appreciate you giving me updates. Basically, what happened. Like you said, you do kind of have an opportunity to kind of jade my mind a little bit, but honestly, you do a pretty good job with it. I'm not too harsh with it. You do a good job.
I try and be fair. And then I'll be like, but I'm totally biased, Rachel. So ignore me. Honestly, like really fun stretch of games this past weekend. And I know that like we're going to talk a little bit about some games. Look, WNBA season is very much like free agency. It's never just like one game happens in a vacuum by itself. There's always the build up, the game before that. Is the team, have a travel game before it. When it comes to DC, I always like to look at when did they travel, how recently was their last game, because I know their best player, Lena Deldon, hasn't played a full season in a while. They've been resting her for a few seasons. So it's just kind of like, where are they? How does her body respond to that? That adds an element of a question mark. If you're better, but before we get into anything, Chicago Sky social media account had one of the best tweets I've seen in a very long time. It was like, super team, light the beam, I don't care, Sky win, or whatever it was. It was glorious. It was magical. Chicago Sky upset one of the predominant teams, a team that we all have projected to be one of the best teams in the league this season, the New York Liberty. We had game one between the two of them. So they had back-to-backs, whatever you want to call it. Some will, well, it wasn't actually back-to-back. They played each other, and then the next game they played each other again. And the Chicago Sky, in my opinion, really exposed a weakness in New York in a way that we hadn't necessarily seen yet. We talked about it early in the season, that first loss to DC, the ability to attack the paint. Which New York player is going to control the paint, be that presence, sacrifice their body and their well-being for the victory, for lack of better terms. And I think a lot of people kind of viewed that as that's the equation to beat them. But then Chicago went on the flip side. Sabrina's not a great defender. Sloot's not a great defender. If you have guards who will punish them for not being great defenders, you are in a good position. Chicago did that in game one, kind of faltered, lost their eye on the prize as the game got towards the end. And in game two, I think we were talking about this, Rachel. It seemed like going into it, at least my mindset was New York's going to bounce back, say, hey, you're not an elite team like us. We're going to show you. We're going to spank you around. They did not do that. They got spanked. Chicago Sky with a big win.
What I will say though, New York did what we kind of anticipated they would do, at least for the first half. You know,
Mm-hmm.
came out, took a huge lead headed into halftime. They were up 19. And then it was like there became this comfortability or complacentness, you know, later in the game in Chicago to rally back from down 19. I think we all kind of, I anticipated after the game being a 1 point game on Friday to you know, for New York to come out with a bit of a vengeance and put their foot on the gas a little bit more than what they had done. And so to respond in a way where you just think you can coast through the second half, and a team like Chicago who plays with a ton of grit, a ton of a chip on their shoulder, right? I mean, they're playing with that mentality. Like people think we're going to suck this year, and we're just going to go prove you wrong. There's a danger in that, I think, in my opinion, and like that reared its head in that second half between New York and Chicago, and that was the most. And I was texting you about it at the time. That was the most alarming thing to me. You know, it's just this New York team. Like, yeah, I could get into the X's and O's and the percentages and things like that, but this is a team very much still trying to figure out their identity. You've got a lot of superstars on there, but like I feel like everyone's kind of looking at the next one, like who's going to be the leader, right? Who's going to bring that grit, that edge, that toughness down the stretch? We're like, we're just going to we're going to stomp on their throat and like put them to bed. Like I don't see killer instinct in this team yet. I have not seen it yet so far this season. What do you think?
Well, no, I completely agree, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, to me, I view this as like two, maybe three different things. The leadership is one thing, right? Like Sloot never been that leader. That's why they needed Candace Parker to come in and bring them to that next level for victory. Stewie has never been that leader. It was always Sue, right? JJ has never been that leader, right? Like that just wasn't her on Connecticut. There's a variety of other people there, but it just was not her. And so now all three of them went from being superstars that were in a, lack of better term, cushy position where they didn't need to be the leader, right? They didn't need to be that person holding other people. I don't even want to say it's holding other people accountable. It's not that. It's when, lack of a better term, poop's hitting the fan and somebody needs to step up, hold other players accountable, and pull everyone together and say, hey, this isn't going to happen. I'm taking over. I'm doing this. Now, Stewie's always kind of been the silent but do that part, right? Like we know she can do that and just dominate a game. JJ, there's been questions of it, heck, even in her MVP season. And then Sloot, no one expects that from her, right? And obviously Sabrina's not going to be the leader of this team. Like she's now the fourth you know what I mean? Like fourth, fifth on this team. So like, let's be realistic about that. But then there's the foot on the throat, the aggressive, you know, dog mentality, that it factor, that player that like Kayla Thornton could be, but she's almost too nice. Like that player who's going to do it all, the diving for the balls, the, you know, taking an important charge, the doesn't care, is going to maybe shove an opponent and get a technical if they know that's going to motivate the rest of the team type mentality. You know what I mean? Like I have my questions at play style with New York, and then I have my questions in terms of just
Sure.
gelling of the team. And it's really interesting actually, because going into the season, Rachel, I think we talked about this. We all knew that New York was going to like take some time to gel, but I almost felt like personality wise, that wasn't going to be the issue. And the bigger issue is going to be in Vegas with Candace Parker, who we all know is a big personality and is an alpha, coming into a place with an Asia Wilson and with all these other players who are leaders also, and kind of how does that work? And so far what we've seen, granted the Aces really haven't had their foot to the fire yet, but so far what we've seen is pretty clearly, in my opinion at least, the opposite, that New York is still trying to find a gel, and almost like you kind of said it, like everyone's just too nice. It's too much looking to the other person.
Well, you just, again, it's a perfect example of like you can put together the best players in the world and just think that it's just going to be easy, you know. And you could look at that as a fan, you could look at that as a franchise, you could look at it as a team. Like there are going to be growing pains of it. I don't care how much talent you have on a team, and we're living through it right now. I mean, look, they're 4-2, so early in the season. We're gonna be talking about them a month from now. Who knows? They could be on a 10-game winning streak. Who knows? But yeah, it is really interesting to kind of analyze like how the development, the mentality of this team shifts in the coming weeks.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, then let's move on. I mean, obviously, look, I think New York fans probably already calling for Sandy's head.
Which
It's
is
the worst team
ridiculous.
ever. Blah blah blah. Here's my thing.
It's ridiculous.
Fans are supposed to do that. Fans are supposed to be ridiculous. Like I want crazy fans. I love it when fans are, dragging me through the mud. I love that from the fans. You know what I mean? For me, it's more about like I hold media and people in the league or in the circles to a different standard than I do the fans. Let the fans be crazy. Let the fans be wild. But shout out to the Chicago Sky, James freaking Wade. Okay, not only the inaugural Winsidr Coach of the Month, but just I don't know about you. I keep thinking about that interview or presser after the Marina trade when people are kind of ragging on him, and he was like, "I don't know about you. I'm not planning on losing." And like, look, we can give him all the shit. Like now, I look back at that and I go, "Was he sitting there going, I know I have something special?" Obviously, it's still early. Don't get me wrong, but was he sitting there saying, I know I have something special. Nobody sees it yet, but they will? Or was it a gamble and he's just like, hey, it's working now?
No, I think that he's just the coach's ego. You know, like they don't. They coach to win games. That's in their DNA. You know, and obviously James Wade is a good coach. He knows how to motivate his players. He's has a phenomenal reputation throughout his entire time in the league. Like he's not. He can't. I don't think he can accept just being complacent or whatever, hoping to be in the lottery. Like, you're competitive. It's in your DNA. So I think what I'm seeing is this team who's taken on that identity, this chip on their shoulders. But I said it a week ago or whenever I was on here last. They're gonna scratch and claw and have this chip and this edge because you got players like Ka and Courtney Williams who just kind of bring that edge, if you will, to this team that I think, and Marina Mabry. I mean, you've got some pretty tough competitors in terms of just not willing to go down without a fight. And I like that. This is going to be a team that's going to scratch and claw every single win that they get this season. Do I still think at the end of the day they're a middle of the pack team? Yes. I mean, and I just think you're seeing it play out. And it's they're not a bad team. They're not a lottery team. I guess they could be, but from what I've seen so far is, they're just going to scratch and claw and fight their way and have that edge to them every single game this season. And they could beat a team like Las Vegas, or they could lose to Seattle. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and honestly, like we talked about this coming into the season, with all these teams that have such big question marks, one of them is going to be the Atlanta Dream a la Nikki Collin, right? Like one of them is just going to have that improbable season that defies statistics. What?
Such a crazy year to think back.
Oh my god, yeah. But like one of those teams is going to float to the top. Like it's just like it's going to happen. The question is, was it going to click for Seattle or LA or Minnesota or Chicago? Like who was it going to be? And what we've seen so far is LA a little bit, right? Definitely looking more cohesive and better than maybe some expected. But the Chicago Sky, I mean, I think they floated quite well to the top, as it were. Indiana Fever, Las Vegas Aces put on one of the more fun, impressive, improbable games of the season. Fever leading by 2 or 4 throughout a large portion of this game, if not all of it. The Aces pull off a 4-point victory in the end, and it really looked like one of those situations where we saw the flash of what this Fever team could be and what they're building towards. And Alyssa Smith is a superstar. In my opinion, she's the face of the franchise. Like, I don't care Leah Boston was the number 1 pick. I don't care that Kelsey Mitchell has been there for a while. I don't care about a lot of these other players in that sense. She has shown, Melissa Smith is versatile. She is athletic. She is a beast and a dog, and she has that will to win. And honestly, like, I'm buying all the stock in Melissa Smith. But in the end, it came down to a team that knows how to win those tight, crazy games. You probably have better insight on that game than I, as we flipped roles and you were kind of updating me on that game while I was watching from my phone. But what was your thoughts on that matchup?
I mean, I think you had Fever came out hot. They were able to set the tone and punch Las Vegas in the face early on in the first quarter. Second quarter kind of dropped off a little bit, so it evened out. They responded, the Fever did, in the third quarter and took a lead. I mean, it was just kind of a tale of a back and forth game. A lot of momentum runs in terms of who was winning each quarter. The part that keeps standing out to me, I don't think Vegas played well at all. Kelsey Plum did not shoot well. Just across the board, they didn't look. I mean, they looked maybe 60% at best. Now, Asia Wilson finished with 27 and does what Asia Wilson does, but it wasn't a huge game for Candace Parker. Jackie Young finished with 19. Kelsey Plum was 0 for 6 from the three-point line, which again is just very unusual for her. But we've seen it a little more the last week and a half or so of kind of some struggles, I guess, offensively. But there's, as a whole, like Chelsea Gray kind of tried to come on a little bit later in the second half, but there's a point at like 5.5 minutes in the fourth quarter where Fever still had about a 4 or 5 point lead. And it's that period of time, like the final 5 minutes of the game, where experience versus youth or lack of experience starts to rear its head. And I think what I saw was there was a couple really back-to-back turnovers. I think there was a moving screen that was called on Alita Boston, and then it came back down, and there was another turnover. I forget what the turnover was, but just that moment in the game felt like a big turning point to me in terms of Fever got deflated in that moment. You start kind of questioning and pointing and trying to figure out, and you're trying to respond. But a team like Vegas, who's so seasoned, who's so experienced down the stretch of games, really was able to capitalize on those final few minutes of the game. And like a lot of coaches point at specific periods of that game where momentum shifted, and I kept coming back to that, was kind of that 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter where Fever had the lead. But one of the biggest battles for teams, especially newer teams, younger teams, is not just one, not getting blown out. So not getting blown out and being competitive, being in games, managing and weathering the flows and the runs that teams go on, but then winning those final few minutes and not allowing that pressure, right? Those momentum periods to throw you off kilter. And honestly, that's what I saw. And it's not even like Fever played bad. I thought they played really well. I thought they had a phenomenal first half offensive showing. I mean, there's so many different weapons on this team that we are not used to seeing. But like, yeah, I mean, it just shows you this is a team that they're on the right track. They've got to learn how to, again, not just be competitive. Now they've got to learn how to win those final few minutes of games. And that's something, in my opinion, is not talked about enough in terms of possessions and final 5 minutes, you might have 10 extra possessions, 10 possessions. What are you doing with those? And those back-to-back turnovers, in my opinion, just killed the momentum.
I also think that, like, Vegas is one of those teams. We saw it from Seattle during their great days, from, LA, Minnesota, the Comets, trying to think DC when they were, just revving every angle. It's almost like the first, second, and third don't matter for teams at that level. And it's literally like, is the game close? Like you were saying, in those last 5 minutes, is the game within reach? If it is within reach, the confidence level those teams have of understanding that, yes, it's only 10 possessions and you mess up on the first one, nice, still got 9. Like the perspective I feel like that those types of teams have going into those moments is so different versus the team. Like, for a current day Indiana, Atlanta, Minnesota, Dallas, Seattle, LA, all quarters matter. They're going to continuously talk about playing full games, things like that. And yes, I know the great teams will talk about playing full games also. But that's honestly like if I'm going to overly simplify it, that doesn't matter. Like it truly, truly comes down to when you like the mediocre teams have to perform all game to get to that point. The high level top tier teams will get to that point, and it's what do we do then? And that kind of in my mind, right? That's the difference between the championship contending teams and the teams that are really good. And I think what we're seeing early is the Aces are still riding that high from last season, and still have that confidence. The question is, what's the longevity of it? How does Kelsey Plum's shoulder surgery impact? Is that what's impacting her shooting? Because she is not looking like Kelsey Plum shot wise. How does Candace Parker fit? I mean, look, it's early in the longest season in WNBA history, so I'm excited to see kind of what we get for that. Couldn't do an episode without talking about Minnesota and DC. Minnesota gets its first win against DC, and to say that it was a confusing game would be an understatement. I mean, heck, there was a play where, like, what was it? A player went up for a shot, or Deladon had the ball. There was like this confusing. Reeve challenged a play and it got overturned, but not how Minnesota thought it would be overturned. So they thought it would be overturned into a jump ball. Turned out it was overturned into like a foul by Deladon or something. When like, I don't know, doesn't make sense.
I didn't watch it, so I'm leaning on you.
No, it was literally like Deladon has the ball. She's going up for a shot right under the basket. Shepard on one side, Fee on the other side, and one of the maybe it was Shepard or Fee. Someone slapped the ball out of her hand. So while she's going up for the shot, she loses possession, and then makes a movement and regains possession, and then we thought was fouled. So it was and this is like in a key moment. I'm not just bringing up this random play for no reason, but it also exemplified the issues of the refereeing in this league, which the players can't call out because they get fined, but I'll call it out for them. And hopefully if the league finds me, somebody will jump in and pay my fine. But basically, like, Eric T after the game, Little T was like, even the Lynx were confused. They thought it was a jump ball. They were cheering for a jump ball instead of an and one or whatever it was. And then the refs just gave them the ball. And that's a free possession. And obviously that didn't decide the game. It ended up having a lot more issues. Like the Mystics just don't look like a cohesive unit.
I mean, points off turnovers. If the WNBA site is correct, which
it was like 35 points or something.
30 points.
Yeah.
Off Washington's turnovers. It's phenomenal. I mean, that's interesting. Yeah. You know, that's a really wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish the box score would auto generate for me instead of having to like do math and add these things. Again,
no, you're fine. It was a really interesting game. Weird because Powers only got 4 minutes. Obviously, like, she missed a couple shots. Fee dropped 17 and 9. Dorka is just every game she's out there looks better and better and better. And for a large portion of the game was covering one of the best players in the league in Elena Deladon and did an amazing job.
Love it.
Kayla McBride was hitting shots, 24 points.
Hitting shots that way and giving you 25 a game, you're going to be in solid shape. Because you know Fee's going to show up every day. You know Shepard's going to give you 10 and 8. I mean, but here's the thing. I'm looking at the box score, and like Washington, my biggest concern so far has been like the backcourt inability to score. They actually have able to score. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
like Ariel Adkins at 18, Cloud at 14. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like Washington is very much a lot to figure out. Like, and
they have a lot to figure out. They did not like. Here's the thing: we know Washington has the talent. They looked so complacent. They looked so much like we don't care about this game.
Which is so interesting because remember game 1, they came out like out of the chute on fire and everyone was like, holy shit, here we go.
Right.
It's 2019 and now here we are a couple weeks later like, wow, okay.
3-3, losing to one of the worst teams in the league, and that was Maisha's first game back. Honestly, like, I'm gonna put it this way: like, we saw starting five great opportunities. Also, shout out to Brittany Sykes, who had a wide open look to hit a key three in the game that tied it. Looked like we were going overtime. 7 seconds left. Tiffany Mitchell gets blocked under the hoop and gets a putback in to win the game. And like, look, 27 points scored in the fourth quarter, right? And they didn't score 20 in the first three. So like, I almost think, to go back to what I was saying about the Aces of waiting to that 5 minute mark and then like really hitting a different gear or whatever. I feel like the Mystics almost think they're on that level. And again, in a nutshell of this game, right? Like, throughout the game, it was a choppy game. It didn't look good. Yes, Cloud's getting her 14 points, Atkins getting her 18. They both outscore Shakira and Delhi. But it was just like one of those games where they didn't look like, it wasn't pretty basketball. And the Mystics, when they're playing good, it's pretty basketball. It's scary defense. And it's a lot of high energy. And it like, I saw some people saying Minnesota punched him in the mouth and they didn't respond. Like, honestly, no, I didn't even. Minnesota scored 14 points in the first quarter. Like, we had 30 points in the first quarter. Okay, and it was 14-16. It was not like a high scoring great game or whatever. It was really like it was DC's game to lose and they lost it. Like, Minnesota fought their butts off, provided the W, not trying to take away from that. But like, we just saw DC playing at the floor and Minnesota playing a little bit higher. We look at the standings now. You got the Connecticut Sun at 6-1 and the Aces at 6-0. Then you got the Liberty with 2 losses, 4-2. The Sky 4-3. You got, other than that, Sparks at 3-2 is the only other team with a winning record. Mystics 500, Dream 2-3, Fever 1-4, Wings 3-3, Mercury with 1 win, Lynx with 1 win, and the Storm, the final team without a win. I guess it's just kind of interesting for me to see the the Mystics and the Wings sitting at a very, very similar spot. Shout out to the Wings. They've looked really impressive at times. I know that they just had a heart-wrenching loss against DC, where, I know you didn't see the play, Rachel, but final moments, Wings have the ball. Nice set. And Satu is then having an amazing season, in my opinion, MVP of their team so far. Takes that last shot when Enrique was wide for a 3. And I just feel like if you're on a team with Enrique, even if you're having the greatest night of your life, when it comes down to the last shot to win or tie, you give it to Enrique. Like, that's what she's there for. I know people are going to say that's crazy or whatever, but like, how many other players in the league, or heck, even in league history, as like 10 seconds counting down, 8, 7, 6, Enrique passes half court line, 4, 3, 2. How many other players, like, do you just start laughing because you know they're going to put up the shot and it's going in?
For sure. I agree.
Like, I don't know who else.
How many game winners? How many game winners do you have to take in order to say I'm so comfortable with this? Like, I want the ball in her hands every time we have a shot to win a game. I don't know.
Right. And it's like, I would trust her more, even if she's 0 for 6 that night on a game winner, than I would trust, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm putting the ball in her hands. I don't care what she's shooting. I don't care if she, you know what I mean? Like, hobbling on one leg. Like, I'm giving her the ball to finish off the game. That's my take. Not the hottest take, but hey, not everything can be smoldering. What are you excited for? What game games are you most excited for when you look to the next week or so?
Definitely looking forward to Vegas and Connecticut. I mean, both back to back. I know we're doing pick 'em here in a second, but I look forward to those two going toe to toe. I'm looking forward to see Las Vegas and how they respond to really not playing great, and then just the continuation / new era of this Connecticut Sun team, and like truly how do those two teams clash? Honestly, I like the Indiana Fever Chicago Sky game. They're pretty even in my eyes in terms of energy and grit that the two teams have. Like you look at the Fever bench and right, like they're just like hype city, energy left and right, energy, energy, energy. Chicago's not the same way, but they bring it on the court in terms of the swagger and the chip on the shoulder that I was talking about earlier. So looking forward to just kind of like a really really tough, competitive, emotional game between those two. I feel like I've watched LA like one time this year, so I'm just ready to get another set of eyes on them. Would like to see Stevens back in the rotation. I know she's like still being worked back in. But honestly, I mean, I know we've got a lot this week. Another one will be how New York responds to Minnesota. Um, not gonna
I have a
lie,
feeling they're just gonna spank Minnesota.
not gonna lie. Yeah, like you don't want to be Minnesota after that loss, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, that would be my two: Las Vegas, Connecticut, Indiana, and Chicago tonight. Tonight.
If I'm looking further down, the on Friday the 9th, the two games I'm not gonna lie, pretty excited for Fever Links, Sky Sparks. I feel like those are four teams that are in a similar realm and are gonna put up a good fight. Minnesota Fever, like Fever is a fun team to watch games of now.
For sure, I enjoy watching the Fever. Like it's not like oh, you used to turn it on and you would just be like, oh my god. But now you're like, what are we gonna see? Who's gonna go off? How's this team gonna look? Like the energy they bring, the excitement on that bench. Like I'm really enjoying watching the Fever and trusting the process of this team getting smarter, learning end of game situations. I mean, like it's